Okay, so step one is going to be removing the brake line. I would recommend replacing these rubber brake lines, steel and rubber brake lines when you do this job. I'm going to be reusing this one just for this video, but I have a new one coming. I just didn't receive it yet and I wanted to get this done. So to remove that, I believe it's a 14mm socket. So remove that. And since I'm reusing that, I'll just put it off to the side with the cloth around it so no dirt gets in it. I'll clean it off and we'll bleed it later. Next we'll remove the bolts holding the caliper on. So I'm just using a 1/4" Allen wrench. You can use one that goes onto a socket or whatever you have. One on a socket would be a lot faster, but I just don't know where mine is. Okay, so once the bolt clears the hole there, you should be able to wiggle it and move the whole assembly off like that. Drain out some of the fluid. And then we'll get to putting the new pads on the new caliper. Okay, so what I like to do, and what I've always done, is just get the new caliper, make sure everything is pretty well identical. This is a remanufactured actual Chrysler caliper, so it should be the exact same, bolts are the same, size is right, and there is a side, so there's a passenger side and a driver's side. Just make sure the bleed screw and the hose bolt match, which they do. Everything's good. And same thing with the pads. So this is the inner pad. It's got a little clip on it that goes into the hole there on the piston, like that. And this is the outer pad. It has a different kind of clip system, so it sort of just slides on. I'll show you in a second here. It just seats into the holes on the side, just like that. So as you can see, those clips just sit in those little holes there. Okay, so there we go. And all I'm gonna do now is, so I'm just going to pull the old rotor off, and I'm going to clean up this area here with a wire brush, and I'm just going to coat all this with oil, kind of like an anti-rust oil, and then we'll get to putting everything back together. In case you guys are wondering, this is wool wax I buy in 5-gallon pails. It's very similar to fluid film, and it just goes on everything that you want to keep from rusting. It's like a waxy film, so there shouldn't be any issue with it flinging off onto the rotors. So we'll put our new rotor on. And we'll slip the new caliper over the rotor and line it up with the bowl holes. Just got to make sure those bolts are out of the way. We'll start the top one. You kind of want to start them simultaneously if you can, just to make sure everything gets lined up. Okay, so we'll tighten it down. The actual torque for these bolts is between 18 and 26 foot-pounds, so we'll tighten them down to that. Okay, so I just have an empty bottle here and this kind of big syringe. I'm just going to suck out as much of this old stuff as we can. It's always good to put new brake fluid in because it does absorb water. And you don't want water in your brake system. And as you can see, it's not the cleanest. I mean, it's got a little pomegranate juice in it, but that's not what's making it really dirty. So it's a good thing we got that out of there. Okay, so we're gonna pour in some fresh brake fluid. Okay, so next step is to reattach the hose. And again, new hose if you're able to, highly recommended. What I'm gonna do here is just leave this hanging like this, and with that clean brake fluid we put into the master cylinder, I'm gonna pump the brakes, and you should see fluid come in here. And I'm just gonna pump it, making sure that the master cylinder doesn't go empty until clear fluid comes out. And that'll bleed the lines and okay, so with that bled, we got fresh fluid coming to at least here. And so that way we're not introducing dirty fluid into the new caliper. We'll remove the bolt that it came with. And then we're gonna make sure this is the surface here, the mounting surface is super clean. So we get a good seal and no dirt. It's going in real smooth. I can actually turn the wrench by hand. The camera died here, but don't forget to put your new copper washers on the inside and outside of the square banjo fitting on the bolt before you put it into the caliper. And oh yeah, this is supposed to move. So May seem weird, but this caliper, because it's on rubber bushings, it's moving on those pins, which is fine. But really what absorbs all the force of the braking is these things right here. So as the wheel's spinning, the rotor's spinning, and then it applies the brakes, and then the brake pads force against this tab right here, and that's what actually stops it. So it's not like the caliper has to be held solid. It's more the pads have to be held solid, and that's what this does. Okay, so next step will be bleeding the brake caliper, which with this tool here is super easy. One-man brake bleeder. This thing is like the best thing I've ever bought. It's under $10 and makes life really easy. So what you do is with a 3/8 wrench, we're going to loosen the bleeder screw. And then we're going to put the one-man bleeder into the hole here. And it's magnetic, it just sits there. And then I'm going to go pump the brakes, and you should see fluid filling this up. I'll go maybe halfway or whatever. And then I'll just close the bleeder screw and we're good to go. Okay, so we still got a little bit of air, so I'll go a couple more times. Perfect, so we'll close the bleeder screw. Just snug, doesn't have to be crazy tight. And that's it for the brake part.